I used to believe I knew everything about the man I married. His name, his past, his family, his dreams. I was wrong. It all started on a quiet Tuesday morning in late autumn. The kind of morning where the air feels too still, like the world is holding its breath. I remember standing by the kitchen window, watching the last golden leaves drift down our maple tree. Inside, coffee steamed in my mug, the scent mingling with the faint trace of Daniel's cologne lingering in the hallway. We'd been married for 20 years. 2 decades of shared dinners, vacations, bills, laughter, and arguments. We'd built a life together. A small but beautiful house on the edge of town, a teenage daughter, and what everyone around us thought was an enviable marriage. But that morning, something shifted. Daniel had left early for work, forgetting his briefcase on the dining table. It wasn't unusual for him to forget things, his wallet, his phone, but the briefcase was different. He guarded it like a lifeline. Out of instinct more than curiosity, I reached for it. It was heavier than I expected. Inside, I didn't find work documents. Instead, there was a small black leather notebook, worn at the edges. No company logo, no name. And on the first page, in handwriting I recognized as Daniel's, was a name ID never seen before. Ethan Ross, 197519999. My hands froze. Why would my husband write someone's name with a birth and death year? And why did the birth year match Daniel's exactly? I flipped through the pages. Addresses I didn't recognize. A phone number written over and over. Strange symbols, as if part of some code. And in between, photographs. Not of me. Not of our daughter. But of Daniel or someone who looked exactly like him standing in front of unfamiliar buildings, with strangers, in places I swear he had never mentioned visiting. At first, I told myself it was a mistake. A coincidence. Maybe part of some work project. But then I saw one photograph that turned my stomach cold. It was our wedding day, the same date, the same church, the same dress, but I wasn't the bride. That night, I confronted him. Or at least, I tried to. When he came home, I placed the notebook on the kitchen table. Daniel, I said, I found this. His eyes flicked to it, and for the briefest second, I saw something raw and unguarded, panic. Then it was gone, replaced by a calm smile. Where did you find that? He asked, his voice steady, too steady. In your briefcase. He walked over, picked it up, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. It's nothing, he said. Old work notes. You wouldn't understand. But I did understand. Not the meaning, not yet, but I understood that my husband was hiding something from me. Something big enough to keep locked in a briefcase for decades. That night, he didn't come to bed until after midnight. And when he did, I pretended to be asleep, because I was terrified of what he might say if I asked again. The next day, I began my own investigation. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend, not my daughter. Instead, I called the number written in the notebook. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. A woman's voice. Cold. Careful. Who is this? She asked. I hesitated. I'm looking for Ethan Ross. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling. Ethan Ross is dead. And if you're calling about him, you need to stop. For your own sake. The line went dead. I sat there, my hands shaking, staring at the phone. I thought I knew my husband. Now I wasn't sure I even knew his name. And that's when the first message arrived. No number. No name. Just a single text on my phone. Stop digging, or you'll end up like her. Her. Who was her? And why did I suddenly feel like the life I'd been living for 20 years wasn't mine at all? I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house felt louder, every shadow longer. Daniel slept soundly beside me, his breathing steady, as if there wasn't a single thing troubling him. Meanwhile, my mind was racing. The text message still glowed in my phone's memory. Stop digging, or you'll end up like her. Who was she? And more importantly, why would anyone threaten me over a name in a notebook? By morning, I had decided one thing. I wouldn't confront Daniel again, not yet. If he had spent years hiding something from me, he knew how to deflect questions. I needed proof. I needed to find out who Ethan Ross really was, and how my husband was connected to him. The first step was small. When Daniel left for work, I followed him. I told myself it wasn't stalking, I was his wife, and I had the right to know. He didn't drive toward the city, where his office supposedly was. Instead, he took a road heading north, toward the old industrial district. The buildings there were mostly abandoned, relics from the manufacturing boom decades ago. He parked outside a warehouse with no sign. I stayed in my car, far enough to avoid notice, and watched him walk to the door. He knocked 3 times, waited, then slipped inside. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. 45. By the time he came out, it was nearly noon. But he wasn't alone. A tall man in a dark coat walked beside him. Even from a distance, something about the man's face unsettled me. It wasn't familiar, yet it felt connected somehow. They shook hands, and Daniel got back in his car. Before driving away, he glanced around, and for a split second, I thought his eyes landed directly on me. I drove home, my heart pounding. If he had seen me, he didn't mention it that night. Instead, he came home with flowers, a gesture that felt more like a distraction than romance. At dinner, he was unusually talkative. Asked about my day. Laughed more than usual. But I noticed something. Every time our daughter, Lily, spoke, his eyes softened in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just fatherly affection, it was almost relief. Later that evening, after he went to shower, I slipped into his office. Daniel kept a locked drawer in his desk. I'd tried to open it before, years ago, when I needed some receipts, and Head reacted sharply, telling me never to touch it. But that night, I was done following rules. It took me 10 minutes and a hairpin to force it open. Inside, I found a stack of documents wrapped in an elastic band. Passports. 3 of them. The first was Daniel's, the one I knew. The second had a different name, Michael Trent, but the photo was still him. And the third bore the name Ethan Ross. Same face. Same birth date. But the issue date was from 21 years ago, 6 months before Daniel and I met. I felt the room spin. Either my husband had been living under false identities, or the man I thought I married wasn't Daniel at all. I put everything back exactly as I found it, locking the drawer before he returned. I forced myself to act normal that night, but my mind was already racing ahead. If Ethan Ross had died in 1999, as the woman on the phone claimed, then who had I been sharing my life, my bed, with for 20 years? The answer didn't come the next day. But a new message did. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a plain white envelope, slipped under our front door. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me, standing outside the warehouse from the day before, watching Daniel. On the back, in block letters, last warning. That night, I barely ate. Daniel noticed. Everything okay? He asked, his eyes scanning mine as if searching for the truth. I lied. Just tired. But inside, I was screaming. The man sitting across from me wasn't just keeping secrets. Someone out there knew I was digging, and they were willing to scare me into stopping. I made a decision that night. If I couldn't trust my husband, I'd find someone else who could help me uncover the truth. Someone who didn't know Daniel, or Ethan, or whoever he really was. I just didn't know that the person I'd choose to trust would lead me straight into the most dangerous part of this story. I didn't tell anyone about the envelope. Not my daughter. Not my friends. And certainly not Daniel. But it was becoming impossible to keep pretending. Every time he looked at me, I wondered, did he know that I knew? Did he suspect I'd seen the passports? By the next morning, I had made a decision. I needed outside help. But I couldn't go to the police, not yet. If Daniel was innocent, I'd be destroying our lives for nothing. And if he wasn't, then going to the authorities without solid proof could make me the next name in that black notebook. I contacted a private investigator. Her name was Claire Donovan. We met at a small coffee shop on the other side of town, somewhere I knew Daniel would never go. Claire was in her late 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to read a person before they even spoke. I told her a carefully edited version of the truth. I didn't mention the threats, just the discrepancies, the other names, the strange meetings, the warehouse. She listened without interrupting, her fingers tapping lightly on her coffee cup. When I finished, she said, "You realize, if what you're telling me is true, this man might not be who you think he is at all." I nodded. "I need to know who I'm married to, Claire. I need the truth." Over the next few days, I became an actress in my own home. Smiles at dinner. Casual conversations in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Claire worked quietly in the background. 2 days later, she called me. "I've got something. We need to meet." We met again, same coffee shop. This time, she brought a folder. Inside were photographs, not the ones I'd seen in the notebook, but new ones. Recent. One showed Daniel, or Ethan, or Michael, standing outside a courthouse in a city 2 hours away. Another showed him meeting the tall man from the warehouse in what looked like a hotel lobby. But the last photograph froze the air in my lungs. It was me. Not recent. Years ago. I was standing in front of a bookstore, holding Lily's hand. She couldn't have been more than 3 years old. The photo was taken from across the street, as if someone had been watching us. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "Target confirmed. Proceed with caution." I looked up at Claire, my voice shaking. "What does this mean?" She hesitated. "I think your husband wasn't supposed to marry you. I think you were part of something else entirely. And I think Lily," she stopped herself. I gripped her arm. "Say it." Claire's voice was low. "I think Lily might not be his daughter in the way you think she is." That night, I couldn't look at Daniel without hearing Claire's words. The idea that my own daughter might somehow be part of whatever this was, it made my stomach turn. At one point, Daniel caught me staring at him. He smiled, slow and knowing. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Just tired," I replied, the same lie as before. But I saw something in his eyes, not suspicion, but calculation. The next day, I found another envelope. This one wasn't slipped under the door. It was in Lily's backpack. Inside was a birth certificate. Not hers. Not mine. It belonged to a child named Emily Ross. Mother's name, Sarah Ross. Father's name, Ethan Ross. Date of birth, the exact same day Lily was born. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was Lily someone else's child? Or had her identity, her very name, been changed? When I confronted her about where she'd gotten the envelope, she just shrugged. "A lady gave it to me after school. She said it was for you." I grabbed her shoulders. "What lady?" "I don't know," she said. She had red hair. She smiled a lot. She said you'd understand. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the words in my head. Target confirmed. Proceed with caution. If I was the target, then what was Lily? The next morning, Claire called me again. Her voice was urgent. "You need to get out of that house. Right now." "Why?" "What happened?" I ran Daniel's fingerprints. Hes not Daniel Harper. Hes not Michael Trent. And hes definitely not a man who should be anywhere near you or Lily. Her voice dropped to a whisper. His real name is classified. I froze with the phone pressed to my ear. Claire's words echoed in my head. His real name is classified. Classified. Not just hidden, not just fake, sealed by the government. My voice shook. "Claire, what does that even mean?" "It means," she said, "that your husband is connected to something, or someone, at a level where his identity is protected. That's not normal for a civilian. And it usually means one of two things: he worked for them or hes running from them." I turned toward the hallway. Daniel was in the kitchen, humming softly while making coffee. Just an ordinary morning for him, as if my entire life hadn't just cracked open. "Claire," I whispered, "if his real name is classified, how do I?" The line went dead. I tried calling her back. No answer. That day, I couldn't focus on anything. At lunch, I drove past the coffee shop where we'd met. Claire wasn't there. When I called the shop, the barista told me Claire hadn't been in all day. By late afternoon, I was convinced something had happened to her. When Daniel came home, I watched him closely. No sign of nervousness. No change in his routine. But when he leaned in to kiss me, I noticed it, a faint scratch on his wrist, like a fresh scrape. "Rough day?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "You could say that." That night, after everyone was asleep, I went into his office again. The drawer was still locked, but now something was missing. The black notebook was gone. In its place, a single sheet of paper. 4 words. Written in bold, block letters: "Stop, or she's next." Underneath was a Polaroid. It showed Claire, tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him. "Daniel," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended, "who are you?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the door to the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "You don't want the truth," he said quietly. "It will destroy everything you think you know." "I want it anyway." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "My name isn't Daniel Harper. It never was. 23 years ago, I was someone else. Someone dangerous. I worked for people who did things you can't imagine. And when I left, I had to disappear. I felt cold all over." "Disappear how?" "I took someone else's life. Not literally, their identity. And then I met you." His eyes softened. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't mean to stay. But you made me forget who I was. For a while." I stared at him. "And Ethan Ross?" He froze. That was all the answer I needed. He knew exactly who I was talking about. Finally, he said it. "Ethan Ross was my brother." I blinked. "Your brother?" "He's dead. And the people who killed him, they're looking for me. They always have been. You weren't supposed to be part of this. But what?" I demanded. "But they think Lily is his daughter." The room spun. "What are you talking about?" "She's our daughter." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not in their eyes. To them, she's the last link to Ethan Ross. And they'll do anything to get her." I backed away from him. Everything in me wanted to scream, to run, to call the police. But then his voice dropped, urgent. "They already have Claire. And if you keep digging, they'll take Lily next." At that moment, Lily came into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her hair a tangled mess from sleep. Daniel's gaze shifted to her, protective, almost desperate. I realized then, whether or not he was lying, whether or not he'd told me the whole truth, the danger was real. And if I didn't act soon, I might lose my daughter. That night, I packed a small bag for Lily and hid it under her bed. I didn't know when or how, but I knew we'd have to leave. The only question was, could I get her out without Daniel noticing? Because if he was telling the truth the moment I made a wrong move, they'd be coming for us. The house felt wrong that evening. Too quiet. Too still. Daniel was in his office with the door shut. I could hear the faint sound of his voice, low, urgent, speaking to someone on the phone. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they went about work. Lily was upstairs, drawing in her room. Every few minutes, I checked on her, making sure the bag ID hidden under her bed was still there. By 10 p.m., Daniel finally came out. His face was calm, but his eyes, they were sharp, scanning me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You've been tense lately," he said. "Too many things on my mind," I replied, keeping my voice even. He stepped closer. "You know, if you're hiding something from me, now would be the time to tell me." I forced a smile. Nothing to hide. But inside, my pulse was pounding. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to his breathing beside me, counting the seconds until it became steady and deep. When I was sure he was asleep, I slipped out of bed and crept to Lily's room. "Sweetheart," I whispered, shaking her gently. She stirred, rubbing her eyes. "We're going on a little trip," I said. She nodded sleepily. She'd always been a trusting child. I grabbed the bag, took her hand, and we moved as quietly as possible down the stairs. Just as I reached the front door, I heard it. His voice. Calm. Almost amused. Going somewhere? I froze. Daniel was standing in the living room, blocking the door. In his hand, not a gun, but a phone. He tapped the screen, and it lit up with a live video feed. Claire, still tied to the chair, her eyes wide with fear. You leave, he said softly, she dies. My hands tightened around Lily's. Let her go, Daniel. This isn't you. He smiled, but it wasn't the smile I'd known for 20 years. This is me. And it's time you understood why. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. They're coming tonight. Not for me. Not for you. For her. He glanced at Lily. The distant sound of tires on gravel made my stomach clench. Headlights cut across the window blinds. Daniel's tone shifted. Urgent now. If you want her to live, you do exactly what I say. 3 black SUVs pulled into the driveway. Men in dark clothing stepped out, moving with precision. They want here to talk. Daniel grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her toward the back door. I followed, my mind spinning. Was I escaping with him or from him? We ran through the backyard, down a narrow path into the woods. Shouts echoed behind us, flashlights cutting through the darkness. I could hear the men getting closer. Daniel turned to me, breathless. There's a cabin half a mile from here. If we make it, we have a chance. A chance. Not a guarantee. We reached the cabin minutes later. Inside, Daniel locked the door and went to a hidden compartment in the floor. He pulled out 2 passports, a stack of cash, and another birth certificate. It wasn't Lily's. It was Emily Ross, the same one ID found before. Except this time, there was a fresh photo. Lily's photo. The pounding on the cabin door started almost immediately. Daniel turned to me, eyes intense. You have to trust me now. Or we all die. I looked at Lily, her small hand clutching mine, her eyes filled with fear. Then I looked at Daniel. The man I'd lived with for 20 years. The man I didn't really know. The door cracked under the force of a boot. Men's voices shouting. Daniel reached into his jacket, pulling out a gun. Last chance, he said. Are you with me? The door burst open. Light flooded the room. Figures in black swarmed inside. And then, a single deafening gunshot. The gunshot echoed through the cabin. For a split second, everything went still. I was still holding Lily's hand. She was trembling, her eyes squeezed shut. When I opened my own eyes, Daniel was still standing, but the man behind him wasn't. He fell to the floor, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Daniel's arm was steady, the gun still aimed at the doorway. The rest of the men froze, weapons raised but not firing. A voice from outside called, "Stand down. We have the girl." I pulled Lily behind me instinctively. She's not going anywhere. I shouted. Daniel stepped forward, gun still ready. Wrong, he said. She's not going with you. And neither am I. The voice outside laughed coldly. You think you can protect her forever, Ross? She's his. You know that. We all know that. My heart was pounding. Daniel, what do they mean? Who's his? Daniel looked at me, and for the first time, there was no mask, just raw truth. Ethan wasn't just my brother. he said slowly. He was part of something called Project Sentinel. He volunteered for it. And Lily, he swallowed hard. Lily is the last surviving child from that program. I shook my head. That's impossible. I carried her. I gave birth to her. Daniel's eyes softened. No. You carried a child. But before she was born, they changed her. They made sure she had what they needed. That's why they'll never stop. The pounding on the door resumed. Shouts. Orders. Time was running out. Daniel tossed me the passports and cash. You take her. Go out the back window. Follow the river until you reach the old train tracks. There's a man named Carter. He'll be waiting. What about you? He gave a small, almost sad smile. I'm going to make sure they follow me instead. I wanted to argue, to stop him, but there was no time. He smashed the back window, helping Lily through. I climbed out after her, my hands shaking, my mind screaming that this was insane. As we slipped into the darkness, I heard Daniel open fire. The men shouted. More shots. And then silence. Lily and I ran until our lungs burned. The sound of the river grew louder, guiding us. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, a figure emerged from the shadows. Carter? I asked, breathless. He nodded. We have to go. Now. He led us to an old pickup truck hidden under branches. As we drove away, I looked back toward the woods. There was no sign of Daniel. No sign of anyone. Carter didn't speak until we were miles away. Then he said quietly, he bought you time. But they will find you again. And when they do, you'll need to decide what you're willing to do to keep her safe. Lily had fallen asleep in my lap. In the dim light, I noticed something I'd never seen before, a faint, almost glowing mark on the inside of her wrist. Not a birthmark. Not anything natural. I touched it gently. Lily stirred, whispering in her sleep, "Hez coming."